Thanks for finding the Locked On NFL podcast YouTube page. Subscribe for great daily content. We're going to have incredible content leading you up to the big game, Super Bowl at SoFi Stadium. The AFC, it's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals. Their first time going to the Super Bowl since 1988 behind Evan McPherson. Another clutch kick by the rookie place kicker, Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor, the third-year head coach, to talk about it. Jake Liscow, of course, Locked On Bengals. They're dancing their way all the way to the big game as well. And let's just kind of go through this game as the Bengals won 27-24, Jake. But this was a KC offense that came out of the gates hot. They scored touchdowns on their first three possessions. And then a key moment in this game, a kind of a turning point, before they head to the locker room for halftime, KC was knocking at the door, and they were about to score probably their fourth touchdown in a row. And then, I don't know, kind of they don't. Patrick Mahomes, without any timeouts, puts the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands, and he can't get into the end zone, and the clock expires. How big was it for the Bengals just to keep KC off the board in that situation?
Ends up mattering a whole lot, right? At the time, you're looking at the way the game is going, and if you're Kansas City, you're thinking, well, we've essentially scored touchdowns on all four of our drives. We just ran out of time on the fourth one, and we get the ball after halftime. And a lot of people are talking about, the halftime margin for the Chiefs, 11 points. Halftime margin in week 17, 11 points. The big difference was the Bengals got the ball out of the half. Mm-hmm. Kansas City, on the other hand, comes out of the half this time, and the Bengals get a stop. Their first stop of the game, and their first stop that would be an omen for the second half for the Chiefs, where they couldn't get anything going. And all week leading up to this game, Bo, I was saying, you can't count on the defense holding the Chiefs to 3 second half points again. That's playing with fire. That's asking for it. But the Bengals somehow, the defense steps up in a massive way in the second half. The secondary in particular, I think, had to play a great game because a lot of it was Patrick Mahomes holding the ball, having to scramble, taking some coverage sacks. So hats off to the Bengals defense, especially the secondary in that second half.
Yeah, that rebuilt secondary in the offseason, and it's all those moves seem to have paid off. 21-10 going into the locker room, and then as you mentioned, they get the stops going, and then we don't see points on the board from KC until the end of regulation. They tied the game, they send it to overtime. Really, what were they able to do defensively, Cincinnati, to bottle them up after that big stand going into halftime?
Something that we saw in the first half that didn't really seem to work when we actually got some of those zoomed out all 22 replays was 3-man rushes from Lou Anarumo's defense. He kind of decided at times that we're not getting pressure with 4. We might as well put an extra guy into coverage. And a lot of times that guy was spying, and it got them beat for a big play in the first half. And they did a lot more of that in the second half, but it's honestly kind of hard to say without having seen the all 22, without seeing what they were doing with their safeties. We didn't get a whole lot of those zoomed out replays in the second half, but it looks to me like the Bengals remained patient with their defense. They didn't start forcing the issue with blitzes and getting desperate, which leads, of course, to a lot of big plays for this Kansas City offense. I think they forced things to stay in front of them, and they stole possessions. At halftime, losing by 11 to Kansas City at halftime, it feels like to come back, you have to steal possessions, and BJ Hill did a great job on a little creeper. I think that maybe confused Mahomes a little bit. They dropped Trey Hendrickson out and maybe causes Mahomes to hesitate a little bit, drop Trey Hendrickson into the hook and throws it right at BJ Hill, who's able to bat it to himself and steal one for the Bengals down in the Chiefs end of the field. And then the Bengals go ahead to tie the game. And at that point, you got a new ball game going into the fourth quarter.
Early in the game, we saw Tyreek Hill. We saw Travis Kelce look like themselves, and they scored touchdowns in the red zone. And then, we mentioned the one going into halftime, and then to end regulation, another big kind of red zone goal line stand kind of for the Cincinnati defense. How were they so effective in the red zone? How were they able to kind of keep them at bay when they needed to, kind of that bend, don't break mentality?
Whatever they did forced Patrick Mahomes to hold the ball. And we got one replay where maybe he had a chance to throw it and he didn't. He's trying to evade the pressure at that point, as he's done so well in this postseason, was immaculate in that regard. In the first half of this game, all game against Buffalo, just fantastic under pressure. But there's a reason that under pressure play is so inconsistent, because sometimes you get got. And the Bengals managed to get back-to-back sacks there, which are both one more than the other, I would say, at least a little bit coverage sacks, and that pushes the Chiefs way out of field goal range. Like we went from having we're going to have the talk about do you let them score again
Mhm.
conversation with about a minute 30 left to boy, it's a good thing that we didn't get too far into that conversation because the Bengals
Yeah.
got the stop. And I guess that's why coaches choose to play defense.
We were going into the divisional round, and they showed the stat before Kansas City went down and scored the game-winning touchdown against Buffalo. 10-1 teams that win the coin toss, and not once but twice. I mean, they nearly picked off Patrick Mahomes. Eli Apple had one slip through his hands, and then they're able to get the pick. And then Joe Burrow and that offense marches down for Everett McPherson to kick them into the Super Bowl. It's just was I haven't seen Mahomes play that poorly, and he certainly seemed like with 120 left in regulation, we saw a different quarterback, and it was interesting to see that happen. On the other side of things, Joe Burrow last week sacked 9 times, but just once on Sunday. How was Cincinnati able to protect their franchise signal caller?
Well, there was still a lot of pressure, I think, in this game. Joe Burrow was protecting himself, I
Mm.
think, to a large degree as well. One, you have a few plays where the Chiefs send some extra guys or they send a sim pressure or a creeper, and Joe Burrow and the offensive line, to their credit, did a good job of picking that up. And Burrow found a couple of crucial escape routes to rush for some first downs in that second half. But, also escaping Chris Jones when Chris Jones looks like he has him twice doing his thing, doing his Houdini act a couple times in that second half. So Burrow played really well under pressure for the most part in this game, stayed patient. The Chiefs, credit them for making an adjustment I didn't know whether Steve Spagnuolo would make in their secondary and giving a lot of help over the top to Jamar Chase and at times even baiting some questionable throws from Joe Burrow. But these Bengals seem to have the clutch gene. They
Yeah.
are disassociated with the failings of Bengals teams past and seem to just have whatever those teams didn't clearly with this march to the Super Bowl.
Jake Liscow, Locked On Bengals. You got to listen to it all week, leading you up. The next 2 weeks, leading you up to the Super Bowl. Of course, follow on Twitter at Jake Liscow. And first Super Bowl since 1988. What's it mean to Cincinnati Who Dey Nation? And is it extra special that a guy just over a 2-hour car ride growing up in Athens, Ohio, and Joe Burrow to be the one to kind of lead him to the big game?
Burrow said right after the game that he's proud to be the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, means a little bit more to him being from Ohio, knowing the history of the franchise. Absolutely massive for the city of Cincinnati. Said it after they beat the Raiders, got a long-standing monkey off their backs and kind of felt like a curse, if you believe in curses, if you believe in the curse of Bo Jackson, had lifted. And here they are potentially going to the Super Bowl, potentially with the rematch. And that would be a lot of fun.
Now that seeing what he's done in his 2 seasons, his short 2-season career, where does drafting Joe Burrow in 2020 kind of sit in Bengals franchise history?
I mean, it's got to be at or near the top at this point, right? You haven't seen first overall picks do what he did. You've seen second year quarterbacks do it, but Joe Burrow, I believe, was the first overall pick in the Super Bowl era to go to a conference championship game, and now he's taking this team to the Super Bowl. Absolutely transformative for the Cincinnati Bengals. When you think ahead to dynasty building and all these things, those thoughts are, I think, a seed that has a realistic chance to grow with Joe Burrow at quarterback, and that is invaluable for a franchise. And so when you think of it that way, hard to think of a higher moment on the Bengals moment pantheon.
Incredible. Cannot wait to watch the coverage. Locked On Bengals on YouTube, and of course, free across all platforms, wherever you find podcasts. James Rapien and, of course, Jake Liscow. They're getting you ready for the big game. Jake, enjoy it, man. It's always fun to catch up with you. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Looking forward to it.